There it is.
Audio's rolling.
Hey,
Welcome to the In Cayman podcast. Sam.
thanks.
How you doing?
I'm happy to see you doing this, man.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you on here. You know, this is exciting. We spend so much time talking about what I'm sure we're going to talk about today, that to be able to share it with the outside world is pretty exciting.
I was thinking about that, if we wanted to talk about something specific, but I didn't prepare anything. I just came here, I showed up, and we'll see where this goes.
You're always prepared, Sam.
Is that so?
Yeah. You definitely give that impression of always being prepared.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's a show.
So this is the In Cayman podcast. You've been in Cayman for over 10 years. Is that right?
No, I think 8 years.
8 years.
I'm going on my 9th, I think, in February or so. Mm-hmm. And
And so you're a lawyer?
No, not a lawyer.
Yeah.
I'm a banker. So I studied economics. I have an economics background. When I was a kid, my mom really wasn't good with money. In order for us to have food, I would actually go in her pockets at night when she got back from work, take the coin, the leftover coin, and put it aside. And then when my mom said, I don't have any money for food, I had this stash.
Is that right?
Yeah, and it kind of became a joke because after a while she relied on it. She's like, "Well, Sam's going to have this stash," and the good thing about that was, as a kid, I could always put my hand in her pockets and take whatever I wanted out of there.
Right.
I did buy some candy and things like that on the side, but
nice.
That's what got me into what is money?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And why is it that my mom really wasn't good with it, and it kind of forced me to be responsible with my money and to know what it is and how it works. And so I went to university in Moscow at one point.
Nice.
A little bit after it was before it boomed. It was in 2000, I think, early 2000. And at that point, Moscow hadn't developed. I mean, if you go to
That was the year Putin got in as well, isn't it?
Close. Yeah. And, it allowed me to see the transition from the old system to the new system. It was a really fascinating time to be there. I think that's really why I went. So always been fascinated with money, and I have a 14-year banking career. I basically helped businesses, grow, buy equipment, and operate. So people would come to me, they would pitch ideas, but I would take their idea and kind of translate it into risk and leverage, and that kind of financial talk that a lot of people aren't comfortable with. So my job would be to have a look at somebody, assess the C's, right, the character, the credit, and is this person likely to make it? And then I would pitch it to the risk team.
And where is this? And this, by the way, this is exactly why you're always well prepared. Everything you've just said shows that you're well prepared. But where was this? Where were you doing a lot of this work?
I was doing this in Canada. I did it in Canada for some time, and then I wanted to get out of Canada. I was tired of the backyard barbecue, suburban kind of life.
Is that where you were born?
Yeah, born Canadian.
Yeah.
So I came to Cayman with one of the banks here, and did that contract. And by the end of it, they wanted to send me back to Canada. And I said, well, let's see what I can do to stay. And I found a role here that I'm really happy with, and I think has a lot of impact. But I'll keep these conversations strictly personal, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Personal opinions, has nothing to do with who I work for.
Yeah, for sure. So you were in Moscow. How long were you there for?
I think I was there about 8 months. I split. I did a 6-month kind of semester type thing in London, and then I went to Moscow. And it was a transformative time. Really not an easy experience. I spoke no Russian. I didn't know anything about Russia other than I was interested in the culture. Read Tolstoy, read the Russian classics, and it's such a fascinating society, and they're very smart. And they're kind of like the genius kid that wastes its life, that kid that never had to work because they're smart, and they end up drinking every night because they're disillusioned with society.
Right.
That's how I see Russia.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
And so at least that was my experience there. So maybe I'm projecting. I'm not sure. But I wouldn't project it because I don't think I'm that smart.
Huh. Yeah, Tolstoy. I've read at least one of his. It was some book about art, what constitutes art. Wasn't a really thick book, but it was the only time I've read Tolstoy. I read a little more Dostoevsky than Tolstoy.
You're fascinated by the dark psyche.
The psyche in general, yeah, definitely.
So I was in Moscow, and I don't know if I should be saying this on air, but I was by myself. I didn't speak any Russian. I didn't know anybody. And I was like, well, I haven't read Dostoevsky, so why don't I read it?
That's the perfect place to read it.
Well,
or
not really.
Or the worst place.
The worst place, right? Like completely isolated from,
right,
what you would consider normal society. And,
right.
And it's so well written. Again, another smart author, right? Very, very good at what he does. And it got into my brain. Like I would walk around the streets in Moscow, and if I heard a siren, I'd be like, "Oh shit!" They're gonna get me.
Right.
And it wasn't because I'd done anything; it's because that book was so well written. It got under my skin. So cool. I haven't finished it. That was Crime and Punishment.
Right.
Couldn't finish it.
I started Brothers Karamazov. Couldn't finish it either.
Right.
Got like halfway through it.
It's really heavy reading.
Really heavy reading.
Yeah. War and Peace is a fantastic novel. Everybody should read that. I have 2 kids, and my son is 12, and I think when he's 13, 14, it's going to be mandatory for the new laptop that he wants or something like that. I'm going to try and...
Yeah, that's a good idea. I like that.
Positively reinforce him to read that book because it's it's formative.
So I find it interesting that you were hodling as a kid, sort of your mom's coins, because you were also a gold bug. You just told me the other day, right? A couple of weeks or 2 meetups ago, you mentioned that, and this was before Bitcoin. So how did that happen? I mean, I guess as a banker, it makes sense. That's what bankers do. They centralize the gold, don't they?
No, I wouldn't. I mean, I wasn't at that level. I wasn't, a top level. I was one of the plebs, working with corporations and.
Sure, but I meant you personally. Like you yourself are.
Did you know that bankers are the most highly leveraged people in society? I mean, they can get free loans or lower rates, and everybody, all of my colleagues when I was over there, were maxed out. Like they had the highest mortgage they could get, the highest car loan, lines of credit maxed out, and it's kind of like that story where, the best midwife is typically a midwife who never gave birth, right? She helped others, right? It's like working in a pizza shop. You cook pizza all day, you're really good at it, but you go home, you're not going to eat pizza, right? So the people who are really good at something typically really don't apply that to themselves.
Right.
And most bankers, from what I've seen, are quite irresponsible with money. So, just saying.
I don't think you're going out on a limb saying that, right? I mean, we've had a couple of crashes this year, right? At the beginning of the year in March,
right, which
was the biggest crash. Even bigger than some in 2008, something like that, right? I don't know if it was if the crash was bigger than 2008. Obviously not, but I think it was like one of the biggest banks went down this year. I can't remember.
Different metrics.
Yeah.
So in terms of like money, in terms of capital, and assets, it was bigger. In terms of number of banks, it was smaller.
Right. Exactly.
So it was a very different kind of crash. And going back to bankers and being responsible with money, it's not really their fault. It's how we haven't taught money in schools, right? So society doesn't really have a great view or a great understanding, at least at our level. We don't apply money very well. And so these bankers, but everybody just in general, I think I can generalize to society as a whole. we're not taught how to budget in high school even, right?
Yeah.
Like, and if the people who are successful managing their money are people who bought it, who learned it from their parents. And so these bankers who are highly leveraged, it's not, who they are, they're bad people or anything. It's just they're a product of society, and they're a product of a society that, is used to easy credit, is, used to buying things whenever they want, like impulse buying, and who sees capital as just a way to get a house or a car or a product. It's not capital to invest, into something productive.
Right.
That's the type of people. You can see money as a way to buy a car, or you can see money as a way to make more money and produce something in society, invest in capital.
Right.
So, the people who I dealt with were the entrepreneurs, right? They wanted $100,000, for example, and I would look at them and look at their car, right? And if their car was a really nice vehicle, is that person really thinking about money the right way? Because that $100,000 has to be spent and double or triple or quadruple, right, with the product of their labor, their expertise. And so that's one of the things that I looked at. And when you look at, there's a story where, I won't go through the whole thing, but, somebody gave a seed to a few people, to his children, right, to see which children could, do
something with it.
Do something with it, right? And, people went to the market. It wasn't just one seed. It was, a bag of seeds or whatever. And people sold it, and then they would take the money from that and they would invest it in something else, and someone else would plant the seeds. And, society right now, if it were, exemplified by that story, would be the kid who gets the bag of seeds and, makes bread with it and eats it. Like that's society. So, we have to look at money differently. Money has to be, all right, this is a bag of seeds, right? Instead of just making bread and eating it, let's plant it. Let's, go to the market and sell it and spend that money and buy some more products. And I think we've lost that as a society as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, that's the entrepreneurism spirit, right? To be productive and to, sort of add on to that as you go. It's interesting because, there's that famous parable that Jesus said, which was the exact same thing. He gave these three guys talents. One got 5, one got 2, and one got 1. And the one with 5 used it and got 5 more. And the one that had 1 talent hid it in the ground. And so when he comes back to, hey, let's see some accounting, the one who had 5, he gave back 10, and the one that had 1, the master got mad at him and said, well, why didn't you invest that? And he took it from him and gave it to the guy with 10.
It's an old story. Yeah.
Yeah. It is an old story. And I think, like you're talking about, there aren't a lot of people do that. I mean, entrepreneurs are a minority in the world, I think. Right. And those are the people that are more productive, say, than the bankers who get this capital and use it to, say, buy a depreciating asset or something that would be consumed as opposed to being productive. So I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah. And, I had to learn that as a kid, but it took me a while to learn it because I went through a phase where I wanted, the greatest, bought a house and I wanted a porch and a barbecue and all that. And,
right.
Eventually I realized that the system was gamed. And this is just my own personal opinion. I think, if you look at the stock markets, you look at the monetary system, it's gained to benefit the people who have exercised power. And by that, I don't mean governments. I mean the people who influence governments. Typically you have, in the US, it's legal to lobby, right? So people don't maybe realize that, but the real decisions are made, by the lobby groups, right? The more powerful the lobby is, the more likely they're going to impact society. And so those are the people with real power, and they have they benefit if they pass a law that benefits them at the expense of society as a whole. So we've seen that gradually over the last 100 years, right? Since 1913.
Why 1913 specifically?
Well, I think right? The certain group of bankers have been trying to do a central bank, right, and centralize control of the money. Back in the 1800s in
Is
the
that
US,
the Jekyll Island meeting you're referring to?
well, that's part of that. Right?
Okay.
And banks, there used to be thousands of banks in the U.S. each printing their own money.
That's right.
Right. And during the revolution in the U.S., I'm not a history geek, especially not about the U.S. But I understand that they printed greenbacks. Right. They were like, the government was actually going to print its own money, and somehow the government printing its own money became bad, and then it had to be banks that printed the money for government. And that's the system that we have today. So the power went from government, which is somewhat accountable to the people, to private institutions, right? The central bank in the US is private. The one in Canada isn't, but it operates very similarly. So yeah, it's an interesting topic, I think.
Yeah, I mean, people always say that, U.S. is democratic and capitalist, but based on what you're saying and also what I've read, that there's this sort of merger of private banks and the state, which operate together. And so the lines are pretty blurred there, right? It's semi-socialist, not saying it in a bad way, just trying to describe it, right? There's this sort of working together of the private banking sector and the state, which is obvious for anyone to look at, right?
I disagree as socialist. I mean, how do you define socialism?
Well, I'm not going to say 100% socialism, right? It's not everything's centralized.
What defines socialism? Like, how do you...
A centralized state, so that the government or the state is in control of everything: education, food, healthcare.
Could be a dictatorship.
Sure.
Right?
Right.
So is dictatorship socialist?
No, it can't be. It can, because obviously Stalin was both a dictator and a socialist. Hitler was not a socialist, but was also a dictator. So I don't think dictatorships are applied specifically to socialists. A fascist can also be a dictator.
I think fascism is probably the closest ism that I would apply to the U.S. right now. And
fascism, you said?
Yeah.
Huh.
And fascism, the way I understand it, is it's a system whereby a very few corporations or private entities really influence governments. So it's a government run by corporations or entities, like
And Hitler's Nazi Germany was kind of like that, wasn't it? It was a lot of private companies working for the benefit of the state, so to speak.
We see, you think of fascism, you think of Hitler, but that ism applies much more broadly, and I think is a very good ism to explain what's happening in the U.S. right now. And when you look at money, I'll give you an example, right? When I was working as a banker, I had this old lady. She's 98, something like that, like 97, like really old, like good for her. And she wanted to take out a huge loan on her house, right? Now, I looked at this lady, and she had a little pension. It wasn't big. It was tiny, and I started thinking, like, how is she going to pay that pension, right? Like, she's going to have to pay that pension from the proceeds of the loan.
What do you mean pay the pension? Isn't the pension?
Pay the mortgage.
Okay, yeah.
Right. So she wanted a house loan. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do that loan. I'm not going to put her in that situation. I don't know what she was going to do with the money. It's not my business. I didn't want to know, but I knew that putting a mortgage, that this kind of, maybe she was going to give the money to one of her great grandkids or great great grandkids, whatever. It really doesn't matter. She's the one that has to pay the mortgage, right? And so I didn't want to do it. I went to my manager. I said, I'm not going to do this. And my manager said, no, we can't discriminate based on age. Right. And the manager wanted that mortgage on the books.
What year was this?
This is probably, I don't know, 2010.
Okay.
Something like that. Why have things changed?
No, I'm just curious, because it was a lot of highly leveraged loans that brought down everything in 2008. So I was just wondering. This was right
it was
after.
in that time.
So they got right back to it.
I started banking in 2005, I think. So yeah, that's probably between 2005 and 2010. And it was kind of a euphoria. And so, my whole banking career, I wasn't happy. I was really unhappy doing this. And,
whatever happened with this lady?
Well, I had to give her the loan.
And what happened with it?
I don't know.
Okay.
Again.
How long was the loan? How many years?
I don't remember.
Because she's 97, 98, right? So
I really don't remember. And every mortgage in Canada has the option of having like a life insurance that you can take on the mortgage. She didn't qualify for that.
Right.
So that loan would have, outlived her most likely.
Right.
And, we can talk about inflation later, but as I did these kind of loans, as I worked with entrepreneurs who were using money properly, capital, and as I gave loans to people who were buying big boats, right, and using money irresponsibly, I started looking into what money is, and that's when I became a gold bug. We look at money today as a society, and I think we've been had. We've been had.
Yeah.
Wool over our eyes, and I think it's from the lack of education.
Yeah.
And if you look at any kind of grade school test from 1910 or 1920, right? I don't think a lot of people would. I probably wouldn't be able to pass that test. Right. So the level of education has gone down. I think it's because we've become accommodating, right? If you're a child and you get a C, right, or you don't do that well, you still get a pat on the shoulder. So there's no system of reinforcement. It's like, well, you did your best. Oh, you did good. And we've become accommodating as a society, and it doesn't spur the child to do better in a way, because they did their best, they did good. Whatever mark they get is going to go on the fridge. So where's the incentive? And we've lost that as a society. So people don't understand money now, and we've only had this fiat system that isn't backed by anything but the promise of the government since the 70s. So I mean, that's 50 years.
Yep. And
money has been screwed for the last 2,000 years. I know you you study Roman times and Roman history. You look at, they debased money back then. The denarius was, it was a silver gold coin, I forget which, and they would remove, make it lighter. They would make, copper inside and just plate it. And that's a way to screw the population.
Right.
To trick them into thinking that, the money is worth the same, but it's not. And I have a deeply held belief that people will pursue self-interests, and that might be my economic background. And I don't think it's a bad thing. It's a good thing. I want to live in a good society. I want to do good things. And that's to my own benefit. However, not everybody sees it that way. Their benefit is trampling on someone else's stuff and taking it. And I think over time, gradually, I don't think it's the malintent of government or people, but it's just kind of a trend. And it's happened for the last 2,000 years where people in power have, taken advantage of their power. And we're seeing that today more than ever.
Yeah, more than ever. You're right. It's just seems like a big flood to me now of money just being printed, and and Jeff Booth talks a lot about that, and how obviously to service the ever growing debt, you need to print actually more and more money. So it's not, the type of increase is, what's the word? Exponential. All right.
Yeah.
It's an exponential increase of printing of money. Now, I remember in school learning about inflation. So, and
You did?
I actually I studied finance. I have a degree in finance.
So university level.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I do remember learning about inflation and what causes it, and the whole 2% is necessary scenario.
Is it?
A whole other question. I'm just saying I do remember it. I remember at the time the books weren't necessarily lying to us, because I remember it saying that yes, this does debase the currency, and the currency will lose purchasing power the more you inflate. So it was giving you sort of both sides, and it, obviously we just took it for granted. So,
well, taking that point, because I studied the same books,
right.
If we had 2% inflation, like really had 2% inflation,
Right.
yeah, it would have been fine. We'd be okay.
You're right.
And
there would be no Bitcoin.
well,
probably.
there'd be no need for Bitcoin, because
Yeah.
we would have had a responsible government or a responsible central bank or responsible whoever does the money. And they would have kept it at 2%. They would have carefully managed how much money they printed and how much money they gave the government. And if that had happened, we'd be all right. We'd be doing a lot better. The thing is, and I want everybody listening to this to go to shadowstats.com. So
What's on there?
Shadowstats.com is a guy a long time ago. I was looking at that site back in like 2006. So he's been doing this for a while. He looks at the inflation calculation, right? And what you see today when you listen to the news and they say inflation's going down, it's gone up, the equation they use, the metric that they use has changed multiple times and big changes. And so this Shadow Stats website, he takes the equation from the 80s, right? When we had this massive, huge amount of inflation back in the 80s. It was like 17, 20%, whatever it was.
Is that right? Like 10 years after they come off the gold standard?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they had to come off the gold standard. Another story. I don't want to go on a tangent, but they had to come off the gold standard because they were printing too much money. And they didn't have enough gold. So they had to come out. And then it just kind of went haywire after. But this guy takes the same equation and applies it to today. Based on that same equation, if you want to compare, how good an orange is, right? Maybe you're going to take like one orange and you're going to say, well, all right, how does that compare to all the oranges I've had in, my life? All right, it's a good one, maybe too tart, too bitter, whatever. If you want to compare an orange, and so you like compare it with all the apples you ate in your life, it's like, well, how does that work, right? You're only going to compare inflation today by comparing it to the same equation, the same metric, as it's always, or else you can't compare the two.
Right.
We can't compare inflation in the 80s if it was calculated one way and inflation today if it's completely different.
Right.
It's not comparable.
And that's the whole CPI argument, right? That the CPI is a joke because they change the metrics every time.
Right. So, going back to what you're saying about the 2%, there's merit to it. However, there's also an incentive for those in power, whoever controls the CPI, the way it's calculated. Every government has an incentive to spend money because the elected officials want to get reelected. So they want to spend money. They need more money. So there's a like hard-coded incentive to print more money, to get more money. And, how do you do that? Well, you go to the central bank. And so we've had this CPI calculator, the calculation. I can give you an example if you want of how it works today.
Go ahead.
So today, how much is a car right now?
Brand new car?
Say like a sedan, not a truck or anything.
I don't know, 50, 60,000?
Jeesh. Wow.
I'm guessing.
I bought my little island car for $7,000, I think. You're high roller. So, all right, say a new car today is $40,000 bucks. right? I don't know. Some you can get a car for 20, you can get a car for 60, say 40,000, right? You get a nice car. Say that's a Honda Civic, the newest model, right? 2023. It's got all the bells and whistles. It has that GPS thing. It has all that. How much was a Honda Civic in, I don't know, 1990, right? Like it was, I don't know, maybe $5,000-6,000, 7,000. I wouldn't know, but it was around there.
Right.
So if you look at the way, inflation is calculated, the car today is cheaper than the Honda Civic in the 1990s.
Huh. Right. Because it should be cheaper because the technology has improved to make it at a cheaper cost, right?
It should be cheaper, but you're comparing $40,000 with 7,000. The way that the price is calculated in the CPI calculation, the 40,000 today is cheaper than the 7,000.
Right.
And the way they can justify that is by kind of cutting the car into pieces. Well, it has power windows. The car in 1990 didn't have power windows. It has, ABS brakes. Car in 1990 didn't have ABS brakes. It has, a nav system. Well, car in 1990 didn't have a nav system. So what they do is they break all the things that cars today have and assign a value to that. And when you strip all that out, they say, well, the actual cost of the car is lower. So the price of the car is, you can buy the Honda Civic today is a lot cheaper than buying a Honda Civic in the 90s.
Now, from a purchasing power perspective, is that actually true? Like, is the value of the dollar that much more back in the 90s? That 4,000 was actually more expensive than the 40,000 today?
If you use accurate CPI inflation, measures, I would say that, it's probably the same.
So it's not a lie then. It is cheaper.
If I want to buy a car today without, power windows, right? Like say I want a car that's 7,000.
Right.
Like like they actually look at it on a nominal basis. It's not just like a net basis. It's like, well, the car is cheaper today. It's not relative to your purchasing power. It's the car today has so much more. You're getting so much more value.
Right.
So it's cheaper.
I see. Yeah. So they're sort of just dividing it by a larger number of parts, basically.
So I was a banker in Canada. I was studying this. I was looking at this and, looking on shadow stats and going, what is this guy doing? And became really disillusioned. So, and this was before the 2008, it's 2006 to 2008 was really when all that happened.
Right.
That's before then. That's when I started banking.
Right.
I started buying gold. I was like, well, if this system makes sense, any kind of sense, and they're printing money, the value of gold is going to go up.
Right.
And I think I bought gold at 800, something like that, and it went to 16 or so. So I was kind of right. But I didn't factor the control of the lobby interests. So there's a gold fixed price, right? And they can fix the price of gold. They can leverage gold. So if the world has, I don't know, 1 million ounces of gold, whatever the amount is, they can sell 50 million ounces of gold using paper gold. And so they can keep the price low because there's a lot of gold. So looking at that, I got disillusioned with gold too.
Right.
I was like, this
it becomes fiat at that point.
I mean, unless people are educated and know, that what I have here is a gold certificate, but that's an IOU, and I'm trusting the bank that issued that, to have the gold, right? Not everybody is going to go that deep. They're going to get a gold certificate. They're going to hold it in their, pension, whatever, and they'll be happy with that. And that's what's allowing, the interests to, leverage gold. I don't know what the leverage is. I think it's 10 to 20x. I'm just guessing.
Yeah.
So for every 10 to 20 ounces of gold that's sold, there's only 1 ounce that really exists. So I was a gold bug.
Right. And that didn't make sense. So it seems like you became disillusioned with gold pretty early as well then. So when did you find Bitcoin?
Well, wait. You can be disillusioned with the way gold is sold and used in the financial system.
Right.
But if you take physical delivery,
Then you're saved from that.
right.
Cool.
So special interests can manipulate the price of gold, and they do. But that did impact my gold coin.
Right.
So I had a gold coin. I have a gold coin. Nobody's
Right.
going to take that away.
Right.
So there was still some merit to gold.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of, using it for trade or it, I don't think it kept up, with actual inflation since, 2005. So I got rid of most of my gold.
Right.
Yeah. If it's not keeping up with inflation to me, and I don't think it's really that great an asset. Stocks barely keeping up with inflation. I think they're probably the closest thing.
They're like on par with inflation.
I think. So basically any dollar that gets printed goes to the stock market.
Yeah.
And it goes up by that same amount.
Right. And that's why Ray Dalio and a few others, when they realized inflation was imminent, and I think Saylor as well. Dalio, when as a kid, he was surprised when whatever crash happened, and they printed more money that the stocks went up the next day.
Yeah.
And he couldn't quite understand that.
Yeah.
How can that be? It's a financial crisis.
Yeah.
And the stock market went up. And the same thing happened after COVID, obviously, right? The market went up, and that's when Michael Saylor got disillusioned and was like, this is not good. So yeah, very, very interesting phenomenon. But stocks, I guess, do at least keep up with inflation. If you're Apple, Google, you're probably outperforming, right? But
Well, the problem is, yes, but people are told that if stocks go up, the economy is doing good.
yeah,
And there's actual, economic value, the production that is taking place that is driving that growth. And I don't think that's the case. I think
Right.
it really is mostly money printing. So if you look at individual stocks and you compare them within the market, that might be true. One stock might do better if the
Right.
results are better.
Right.
But as a whole, as an aggregate, the stock market is basically just a function of how much money is being printed, which society is then dissolute. Well, we're kind of, so the stock market's going up. My pension's going up. It makes people feel good.
Right.
And they're not going to start. People aren't going to start investigating. Why did it go up? Why did it really go up?
Right.
Right. So then what does that person do? Well, my pension went up. My stocks are going up. Oh, I'm richer now. I'm going to go and buy that house. I'm going to buy that car. I'm going to buy this.
Right.
And that's kind of
Not true.
It's
necessarily.
not true. Yeah.
Yeah. So when did you discover Bitcoin?
You want to get to Bitcoin, huh?
Yeah, let's get to Bitcoin.
Yeah.
All roads lead to Bitcoin.
I for now, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, looking at this system that we have now today, I really do believe Bitcoin is, I'm not religious, but it is like a godsend.
You were saying that at the last meeting. Not that it was a godsend, but it was like you were getting cult vibes. Wasn't it you that said that?
Everything. I mean, in your previous episode,
Right.
You're talking about mental apps, right?
Right.
Where if you're as a human, right, you have apps and you download information. And
Right.
It was a great podcast, by the way.
Thanks.
And so, yeah, I've loaded the Bitcoin app, and yeah, it's exciting. And when you get excited about something, you want to share that.
Yeah, it's true.
And so, yeah, I think there certainly is, and it's not for me specifically just Bitcoin. I think there's a lot of great technologies being developed right now that have used other tokens. I take Brave browser, for example, right? Like,
What token do they use?
I don't really know,
Okay.
but originally, but I'm sure there was a token. That's how they raised money, I assume.
Okay.
And now you have this great browser that really allows people to be private, to watch YouTube without ads. And they basically fight in the background for my privacy and my digital freedom. So they didn't use Bitcoin. They don't depend on Bitcoin. So there's a lot of great technology being developed now that isn't Bitcoin. But in terms of money, and value, Bitcoin is the best. And there's a lot of reasons for that. You spoke a little bit about Bitcoin
on the last podcast.
podcast. And, you look at money and it needs to have certain things, right? Divisibility, it needs to have accountability. Doesn't need to, because our money today is not accountable at all.
Right.
And that's why it's failing.
Right.
If we could audit the Fed, if we could audit, how much money is actually being created and where is it exactly being spent, it would be a better system, but we can't.
Didn't they just lose like $2 trillion the other day, unaccounted for?
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Where did that go? I don't know.
Yeah.
Went to wars, right? Like, irresponsible money leads to irresponsible, spending. And if I have a shirt here, it says "Make war unaffordable." If governments had to come to you as an entrepreneur and say, "Well, look, Badir, we want to go and bomb, Uzbekistan or Iraq or whatever country is, the coolest country to bomb at that time." They say, "Well, Badir, we're going to raise your taxes. We want to buy these, great missiles and, this ammo, and there's this new guns now that we're really excited about. It's going to kill a lot of people. These are great. We're going to go buy them, but in order to buy them, we need money, and we're going to come to you and raise your taxes." Right? I think most of the population would go, no, I don't think we're happy with you, taxing me more so you can go and kill people.
Bomb some
Nobody
country.
wants to, right. So if the world, I think, had a responsible monetary system, you would destroy or kind of negate, half or more of the wars happening.
Right.
We'd have a better world because governments would actually, have to be accountable for how they spend it, and they couldn't just print money. Now, if the U.S. wants to go to war, they print money. Print money, buy those missiles, send those missiles. They don't have to ask the permission of their constituents. Yeah. There's something really wrong with that, I think.
Yeah. Military industrial complex, feeding that monster. I wonder how many wars, if you go back in U.S. history, they would actually have been able to undertake if they had sound money policy, right? I think maybe World War II, and then after that, I don't know if much else.
There have always been wars, even when we had a very strong gold standard.
And there's always been inflation, though, right? And generally, they had to inflate the currency to fight the wars.
Yes, but the inflation typically occurred either as a dynamic, like if you look at a balance, you have the production of an economy and you have the growth of the money supply. There were gold mines back in the day, right? So when Christopher Columbus discovered the New World, they took all the gold from North America they could find, right? It wasn't really that valuable in terms of the Native Americans. They didn't value it as much.
The same way the Europeans did?
Yeah. Okay. So all this gold went into, Europe. And prices went up and there's inflation. And it's just a natural thing that's happened forever. And actually having a gold standard may cause more wars because now you're a government, you have an army that you can't pay anymore, and your neighbor has tons of gold. What are you going to do? You're going to invade them.
Right.
So gold has caused wars. I'm not saying that, responsible monetary system would fix everything. But if you look at Bitcoin, if you had two countries that had Bitcoin, right, as a monetary system, one country has a big army they can't pay, right? That same scenario. And the other country has tons of Bitcoin, right? They just saved all their money.
Right.
Even if this country invaded that country, they still wouldn't be able to get the Bitcoin. Because there's no vault that you can break into and get the Bitcoin. Right. If that country has been responsible with how they're storing their Bitcoin with the keys, and if they're responsible and they do it properly, there really is no way for that country to go and take the other country's Bitcoin.
And no incentive for them to, because they're like, what's the point? We can't get their Bitcoin.
So imagine that then. You have one country that's got this huge army, right? And they go, well, instead of invading you, because we know we can't get your Bitcoin, we know we can't get your assets, we can't just invade you and, go in a bunker and take all the money. Why don't we, do some kind of deal where, we got this huge army, we'll protect you, right? You pay us for the service, and there you go. There's trade. Right? All of a sudden, that scenario, and maybe I'm idealizing it, but in my mind, that's a much better scenario than, the scenario where you have gold and, one country is invading another. Or, you have a scenario where, the government that has the big army is just printing money, paying the army. And then, the inflation goes up and people are unsatisfied and they just end up invading anyways because they need to send that army somewhere. So Bitcoin's a solution for a lot of things. And it's a shame. It's a shame that more people don't realize that. When I talk about Bitcoin, people say, well, crypto. Crypto's Sam Bankman-Fried, FTX, and there's
Binance.
Right. Binance. I like how you say that. So, people think, well, it's a scam thing. There's no value behind it. There's nothing behind it. False. The Bitcoin is a math and energy backed monetary system. The math behind Bitcoin is so strong that there's no way to crack it, even with quantum computers, and even with quantum computers in the next 5 years, if things keep going the way they are, or 10 years. And the cool thing is if they do come up with a computer that can crack the math behind Bitcoin, that makes it safe and secure, the code can be changed. And there are quantum proof encryption algorithms that can be applied. Okay. So once quantum computers come along, we can crack Bitcoin. I can take all your Bitcoin. Okay. All the nodes just agreed to change. Done. Now it's quantum proof. So Bitcoin, when I bring it up, people talk crypto and they look at all the scams from the media and they just don't want anything to do with it. Yeah. And they repeat certain things like there's nothing backing it. If the internet goes down, what are you going to do with your Bitcoin? There's nothing physical.
My favorite is I like the blockchain. I like that technology of it. That's the takeaway. That was actually the first thing I said about it too. I like the blockchain. I like that ledger.
We all go through that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I bought Dogecoin. I bought all these other coins because it was like, it was a free for all casino.
Right.
I'm going to put my bet on this one. And, I read the white paper. I'm no, technocrat. I'm no technology expert.
That's right. You were in the crypto scene before.
Yeah.
Before Bitcoin. Yeah.
It's like a path. And we all know this, that, you get in the technology, and once you learn about the technology, then you realize why Bitcoin is kind of the most secure and the best for money. I mean, there's other tokens that are great for other things. So it's not to say, all the other tokens should go away. Ethereum's a great platform because for smart contracts. And there's a lot of great projects and use cases. But when it comes to money, in my opinion, nothing beats that Bitcoin. So it's hard to convey that to people.
Yeah.
And put it this way, if I'm a government, right, and my monetary system is going down, there's heavy inflation, I have to print more money to
pay bills,
and because I have all these commitments, and I know there's a problem, and there's an exit door, right? There's an alternative. Now, as a government, I would have a tendency to, stop that exit door, close the door, keep people in the system, because the more people you have in the system, the more people you have using your currency, the more people have faith in it, the more it works. Countries.
If they exit, it would just increase inflation.
That's right. Yeah. There's less people using the money, so there's more money floating around that isn't being used, and so prices go up. So it's a self-fulfilling kind of thing. So and going back to my original comment about who's really in control, in my opinion, the banks and corporations, what does a big corporation also own? Well, they own media companies. So when I say governments, I don't mean governments are, cigar smoking, making plans for, humanity's future in a very nefarious way. I think governments they operate with incentives, and they're incentivized on a 4-year cycle to print money and give free things to the population and get reelected. That's the incentive system. So the people with the real power, I think, again, my personal opinion, are those institutions that, they're lobbying, right? They're the ones that are lobbying. They're doing it legally. They're not doing anything illegal. And they own media companies. So the media companies will focus on FTX, and that will turn off, 60, 70%, whatever that percentage is on crypto and Bitcoin. There's a very strong incentive to shoot it down because, the banking lobby in the US, I'm not an insider in any way, but from what I can see, is very powerful. So, and there are, golf courses, golf clubs where, certain groups of people will meet and have a cigar and play a round of golf, and they talk amongst themselves. I don't think there's a big shadowy conspiracy.
Right.
I think it's just human nature for people to get together and go, look, you're doing this. Let's help each other out. And if you own a media company and I'm a bank, I'm gonna go, hey, Badir, there's this thing called Bitcoin. We're playing golf. And I'm just saying, what if, what if I gave you this and you ran this? You focused on stories that were against Bitcoin. And whack another, ball in golf, and then go for a drink after. And I think that's how it happens.
Right.
It's more organic than anything.
Right. I agree with that.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with that. I think it's more of like a global effect on everything. And there's not sort of that one individual at the top that we could sort of point to.
There might be. I wouldn't know.
No, I think I don't know that there is. And even if there is, that individual dies eventually, right? So it just rolls over. Death comes to us all. So there's no one always sort of at the top. I think it is more organic, and it just sort of happens in the organic way in which you're saying.
I hope it's organic, because the scenario where there is a powerful family, that is like it's a dynastic family that has been working towards, accumulating more power, more assets, whatever, for generations, right? Like if that is the scenario, that's it's difficult to fight an enemy you can't see, and it's a bit difficult to identify, what's going on if you don't know what's going on.
Right.
So I like to think that it's organic, and then it's just human nature, and it's how humans are incentivized in our current system.
Right.
But I listen to a lot of opinions about, certain families, and it's plausible. I just hope it's not true.
Yeah, I actually found it interesting just now when you were talking, again, staying on topic of everything sort of being organic, but you were talking about gold wasn't perfect because that also inflated. And of course, I'm not talking about the fiat on top of it, but also, the gold supply increases. So both those things. So inflation was just sort of a common thing. I think it's something, like you said, it just happened. It's a natural thing, right? Supply of anything can pretty much be increased. And where I'm going with that is, I also think that is part of the reason that Bitcoin is hard to see, because it's a new thing that's never actually existed before, an uninflatable instrument of value. And so we almost don't know how important that is. We almost can't really see how effective that's going to be because we've never had anything to compare it to. And I've always said, and I've actually heard Michael Saylor say this too, he never understood money, and I certainly never understood money until I understood Bitcoin. Right? I needed to see the best, soundest money ever made for me to be like, that's what money is. That makes sense. But Bitcoin didn't exist before 2009. So we had all these years and we just didn't know better. We were really it was just an organic thing. Inflation was just an organic thing. We're in 2%, okay, maybe it's 10%, who knows?
And you're one of the rare few who didn't, fall prey to that, crypto FTX kind of narrative that's going around about blockchain.
Yeah.
Somehow you were able to see through that and study Bitcoin and why Bitcoin's a great monetary system. And, that's kind of like, you woke up, right?
Yeah.
To use that word.
Well, it's funny because it was the SBF crash that got me into Bitcoin, which was just about a year ago. So I've only been really into it for about a year. And when FTX crashed, I was like, all right, I've had enough. And this is actually the same reason I went to study finance. I've had enough of not knowing. I need to know what that is. And I remember as a kid looking at the TV and seeing all the stock symbols that would come across the screen. I'm like, what is that? No one could explain to me what that was. So I was like, no, I got to figure out what it is. Studied finance. Same thing with crypto. When that went down, I'm like, all right, I need to understand what crypto is now. I can't not understand. So I was probably always hesitant of it at first. Maybe that's why I never fell into the crypto scheme. And I definitely Sailor orange pilled me, and he's a maxi and it's not really down with the crypto scene. So I just think I was just at that moment in time, because it was a crypto collapse that got me into Bitcoin. I never really had a need to sort of investigate the crypto scene that much. If it looked like a security and smelled like a security, then I'm not that interested in it until it blows up and does something great for the world, which could happen.
There have been a lot of crypto scams. I've seen a lot. So, good for you. And hopefully we can steer some people here into, instead of just buying the hype, right? And it's a sad thing that the media is supposed to educate us, right? About what's happening, about, the various different opinions. In my mind, a good news article is one that looks at both sides, not one that tries to sell a point. And media nowadays, in my opinion, is mostly trying to sell a point. And if the media was properly doing its job, then people would need to study Bitcoin because they would be more wise to inflation, to why inflation happens. And they wouldn't need to, listen to podcasts and read books. And there's a really high barrier of entry to the Bitcoin, to understanding Bitcoin. Because, you look at it and you're like, well, there's nothing backing it. What? It's a scam. It's just going up in value because, more people are buying it. It's like a Ponzi scheme, right? Those are the things that the media is saying.
Right.
And so it really takes somebody with a kind of a healthy skepticism to go, all right, well, if it is a Ponzi scheme, let me make up my own mind with facts. And that's not easy. People are busy. You go to work, especially now with phones and Netflix and all the entertainment that we have. I mean, I don't know how many hours a week I spend on Netflix and YouTube. And I kind of wonder, I was like, what was I doing before? I had so much time before that I was using for other things. And now it's all going to entertainment.
Right.
So especially with that, people think they don't have time.
Right.
But you make time for what's important to you. And some people say, I want to understand how money works, and they'll put the time and understand it, but it's a high barrier to entry.
Yeah, it is a high barrier to entry, and it is a personal journey that you cannot really orange pill anyone. They have to orange pill themselves.
The best, I'm not here to convince anybody. And I used to do that. He's Bitcoin's great. Look, here are the reasons.
It's so exciting.
Right.
I love that phase of it. I'm still in that phase. I just, I talk about Bitcoin to everyone. I'm trying to scale it back a bit, but it's just so exciting.
Yeah. Well, then you kind of become that, religious person always talking about one thing, not to bash religion. No, for
sure. I totally get it.
You have this, and they're just enthusiastic. They've discovered something. They feel great. They feel empowered about whatever belief system that they're joining, and they
sincerely believe it can help you.
Yeah. So it's in that way. It's very similar. But I realize that you can't change somebody's mind by giving them facts. You enable people's journey by asking a question.
Yeah.
And, to the people here, that question might be, do you feel that something's wrong in the financial system today? Right. And you kind of back off from that. And I think the majority of the people know and think there's something wrong. And they don't quite know. And hopefully that question, then allows them to embark on some kind of and whatever journey it is and whatever conclusion they end up, maybe they'll be, gold bug. Maybe they'll say, well, we need, more responsible government and we need to change so whatever conclusion they draw, at least they're embarking on that journey. And if more people do it, society as a whole wins. There's no scenario where you have people in a society that are studying something and gathering knowledge and gathering experience and increasing their degree of understanding on a topic. There's no scenario where doing that harms society. Sorry, just maybe I'm wrong, but that's just, the more people have knowledge, the more people are wise. And this goes for science. It goes for, health, right? The more information you have on health and nutrition, science and physics and money, and, the more a society educates itself, society wins as a whole. It's not a 1 + 1 = 2 sum. It's like 1 + 1 = 5. It's exponential.
Right.
And so just asking that question, do you think something's wrong in the financial system today? And regardless what people study, watch, read, even if they do nothing, I guess, doing nothing is probably the worst thing. As whatever they do and whatever conclusion they draw, I think society wins as a whole.
Yeah.
If they have that feeling. And if they don't have that feeling, society is great. They have a business. They're doing great. Fair enough. You don't want to change something that's working for you. You don't want to shoot yourself in the foot. And whatever they're doing, please let me know what it is so I can, have that same belief. But I think the majority of the people think there is something wrong. And I've had that, in my career, pretty much when I started with the bank.
Yeah.
And the big thing for me, I was getting paid 40,000 Canadian, $40,000, right? And that year, the CEO of my bank made $9 million. So I divided $9 million by 40,000, and I think it's like 300 people, right? That's 300 times greater, something like that. It's like a huge number. So I say, all right, this one guy is worth 300 of me.
Right.
Whoa. This one guy can delivers more value to society than 300 people like me. And granted, I was, low on the experience totem pole. That's kind of like an entry level wage.
But the example still makes sense.
300.
Yeah.
Think of a room with 300 people.
Yeah.
And then this one guy, right? Like who produces more for society, right?
Right.
And just my first year in the bank, kind of going into this, corporate system, that's the first thing I saw. And I was like, whoa, wait. Immediately I felt something's wrong, right? And yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think a lot of people are just caught up with their lives. I think even if you ask them if they think something's wrong with the financial system, I think a lot of people would say no.
Really?
I think so. I mean, what's interesting to me is the casualness of the astronomically high numbers that are thrown around now. The trillions that's due in debt.
Sure.
I mean, no, due in interest on the debt, not even the debt itself.
Sure.
And these trillions that are needed for this war and that. I mean, it's just
so
casual.
Well, there's experts that know that, and they know best, right? Because they studied economics, or they're bankers, or they manage it, right? So they know best. So yeah, I don't have to worry about it.
Right. Exactly.
Maybe you're right. And if that's the case, look at some other segment of or aspect of society that you think something's wrong,
Right.
Regardless what that is.
Right.
I think everybody should strive to improve society one way or another. And if it's not financial, then okay. It's also good to have skepticism. So if somebody comes up to me, I listen on the news, and they say, you got to eat only meat, right? Or you got to eat, this percentage of this kind of food and this percentage of that kind of food. And that's what I'm told. So that's what I believe. I got to have milk in there.
All right.
Right.
And carbs.
And then somebody comes up and tells me, well, you know why milk was included in there, right? And I go, no. And they go, well, milk was included because there's a dairy industry, and they have a very strong lobby. And the food pyramid was, heavily influenced by that lobby. And I go, oh, really? No, I didn't know that. And again, it's not corruption. It's not because there's evil people scheming to add milk to the food pyramid.
Right.
It's because the way the system works, it incentivizes a certain type of behavior. And, that's what happened in this case. And so when somebody comes up and tells me this, it's good to have I'm not an expert in nutrition. I don't know if this is true or not, but this is what the person told me. And it kind of makes sense based on my worldview. Mm-hmm. So it's good to have a healthy skepticism about everything, even if you're not an expert. Mm. And, if somebody comes up to me and, says, I'm going to give you marriage advice. I'm like, all right, like, what's your track record? Are you good at marriage? Right? And if you're not, I'm probably not going to listen to you.
Right.
And so this guy who told me this thing about milk, like, I know a little bit about that person, other than nutrition. And this is a decent guy that I trust. So yeah, I tend to trust that person and be skeptical about what I'm told.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I told you about this at one point. This little book called The Philosophy of Photography, and it's by maybe he's a Belgium philosopher, Willem Flusser, and he wrote in the 80s. And it's really small little book, but super cool. He starts with like the photographer, and then the camera, and then the photographs. And this was all pre-digital, but he like sort of preempted the digital. And then he went to the distribution channels, and then who funds the distribution channels and what are their motives. And, for him, in his philosophy of photography, at the end of the day, what the true photographer needed to do was decode everything and determine the intention of the publishers and the lobbyists or whatever it is, the media.
The people who control that sector.
Right. Exactly like you're saying since the beginning of this podcast.
And they're not evil. They're incentivized to operate the way they operate.
But that's how you decode everything.
Yeah.
You get to them.
That's exactly it.
And figure out what they're doing. Yeah. And then you make your decisions.
And it applies to anything. True. Right? Anything in society. There's somebody with power, money, that is incentivizing the system. Mm-hmm. You look at health. That's another one.
Yeah. Nuclear energy is another one.
Nuclear energy is in what way?
Well, the oil lobbyists aren't a big fan of nuclear energy.
Right.
So they're keen to perpetuate, and I'm not a expert, but from how I understand it and hearing different people talk about it, they're keen to perpetuate the myth that nuclear is dangerous, so that we don't fool with nuclear anymore because they need to keep their powerful oil supply.
So there's this is just something I've heard is really kind of scraping the conspiracy floor, right? But it's an interesting thought. Mm-hmm. When the U.S. was developing nuclear, weapons, right? Mm-hmm. There's an incentive to, keeping that technology hidden, right? Because you don't want the opponents, the enemies, to get a hold of it. Mm-hmm. And there's an incentive to keeping that whole industry kind of under wraps. So what's the best way to do that? Well, you talk about how dangerous nuclear radiation is. Mm-hmm. This is just, like I said, I'm scraping the bottom.
Yeah, okay.
And you perpetuate that, and now nobody touches. If you have you have some nuclear, something that's radiating nuclear energy,
you back off.
I'm scared.
All right.
Right. So when that happens, it's easier to control. I watched this video of a guy who died recently, and he was one of the top nuclear energy scientists. And his whole life, he's been going around saying that's a nuclear scare scam.
Right.
And that's the name of the video. It's certainly not on YouTube.
Is it not?
No.
Huh.
Which is interesting to me, when we can get to that point later. But he goes around saying, no, the nuclear scare scam is a scam.
Right.
And, you see him, like, he takes, what's the yellow cake again? What is it?
Like radioactive, plutonium, uranium. Yeah.
So he takes uranium dust, and he takes a radiation kind of measuring thing, and goes like it's tacking.
Right.
It's really radioactive.
Right.
He takes this and then he eats it. Right. And then he talks about how he put that like in the mortar of his house in the basement. Just to piss off the people who are perpetuating the nuclear scare scam. Right. And he died old. He didn't die young.
Right.
He didn't, like, this guy was either he was immune to radiation, or there there was something to what he was saying.
Right.
And again, I don't know what to believe. I'll stay away from nuclear material. Right. Because I don't know. But it's good to have a skeptical kind of approach to it. And in China, I'm going to take a little tangent.
Okay. China's good.
So in China, in China and Russia, back when it was communist, and probably still today, I don't know. When you have a country where media is heavily controlled by the state, so the state says, this is allowed to be aired, this is not.
Yes.
The people understand that the government is going to steer things the way they want it to be steered. And this is part of Chinese society, from what I'm told, is that if something is being censored, the Chinese people immediately know that's the truth. It's automatic for them, because the government wants to hide it. So why would they want to hide it? And they know immediately, if it's being censored, it's the truth. Right? It's too dangerous. It's something the population shouldn't know. The population is not intelligent enough to know this, or it goes against what we're putting forward. So it's instinctive for Chinese. It's like they know their media is censored. There's stuff that they can see, and the stuff they can see is what the government okays. And if there's something that's censored, they go, oh, that's the truth. Right. We know it. Right. You don't even have to ask us. Right. We know there's some truth in that. Right. So when, YouTube blocks this nuclear scare scam video, right? I go, why? What is it going to force people to go to a hardware store and buy uranium? No. Right. I can't buy uranium. Right. Like, why would a guy saying that uranium isn't really a health hazard, why would you need to,
take his video down?
Take his video down. What the hell? Leave it up. I mean, it's not like I can go and buy uranium. Right. Like what? Right. I'm never going to be able to do that. And like, what's the logic behind it? Why would something be censored like that? So it kind of adds credence to what he's saying. Right.
The fact that they would not have it up there. It's an interesting story, because when I was in Cuba, we were doing a film there, and whenever we would eat at restaurants, our Cuban producers had like this little app, and it would tell them which ones were state restaurants, and they would never go there. Okay, no, boom. So they'd almost identify what wasn't state, and that's where we're going. And it was so strange, and it's sort of a similar thing like you're saying, like in China or Russia, even the U.S. today, when the media is pointing at something, then it's almost like, okay, it's that other thing there is where the truth is where we need to go.
And we're censoring, right? This is going to go on YouTube. There are things I know I can't say right now. And I don't know if nuclear scare scam is one of those things, but probably not.
We'll find out.
Probably not. However, there are things I can't say. Right. Opinions I can't voice. Right. Things we can't discuss as members of society. Right. On a platform like YouTube. Right. And whether that's like, transgender, I think we can discuss transgender stuff. Right. But, vaccination, like if we talk about certain topics, this will get taken down. So it's interesting to me because having studied economics, I have a deep belief of, in the invisible hand. You can have a system where you have no real rule of law, but it'll still kind of work. You can have free enterprise and it'll still kind of work. It just arranges itself. And I think that discourse makes society better. If I were to go up and say, I think the sky's orange, you guys are all wrong, right? You guys are all wrong. The sky's not blue. No, it's a conspiracy that it's blue, and the government's been saying that. You've been lied to all your life, right? I can say that. Like, who am I harming? Like, how? And then if I get you to be curious about the color of the sky, and then we look at the color spectrum, and we do a spectrum analysis on the light coming from the sky, and we do all this research, and great. Now we're going to come to a conclusion, more than likely, that the sky really is blue,
right.
And then we're going to define what blue is,
right.
And we go through all this scientific process,
right.
And I think society wins,
right?
Because somebody questioned the color of the sky.
Right.
So what censorship is a big thing now, and most of the countries now are putting disinformation laws. And the UK, Canada, Australia.
And what are those exactly that are saying that media cannot willfully not show or not publish particular content?
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
Right. Yeah. And that's done surreptitiously, right? So the government's not actually putting a list out there saying you can't talk about the color of the sky. They'll say something like, we're going to put this law in, and we're going to define misinformation as this really nebulous term. It's anything that harms society or is likely to.
Okay, so you're saying the opposite of what I just said. Sorry. So they're literally implementing laws that maybe sort of have a vague interpretation that would justify YouTube not publishing certain content.
It would force YouTube to take out.
Force YouTube, even worse, yeah.
And so, I believe free speech is fundamental to a democracy, to the, if you, let's take ourselves out of Cayman for a bit, or even we can stay here, but if you have a government and the people aren't allowed to question something the government does, the government, I don't know, wants to make all the windows tinted blue, right? And the government really, really wants to do this. If you're not allowed to question that, and if you're questioning that, you get put to jail, right? So if they say, anybody who says that windows shouldn't be blue is going to go to jail. Whatever the thing is, and people are going to be scared. They're not going to question this. And, the government's going to have the ability to then make all windows blue. And that to me is anti-democracy. It goes against the concept that people should dictate what government does, right? A civil servant is called a civil servant for a reason. It's not the other way around. It's not that people serve the government. It's the government that serves the people.
Right.
And that's being flipped. And one of the key ways that is flipped is by giving government the ability to censor. And however well-intentioned it may be, because again, I believe in this organic kind of incentivized way that, things develop.
And it could be well-intentioned.
It probably is. Let's hope it is.
In a lot of cases, I'm sure it is.
Yeah. You got people being bullied online. Like, you got CSAM, which is underage kind of, porn and all that. Nobody's going to be against that, like those kind of laws being put in place. When you look at human frailty, though, it's once you have a tool, right? You're going to use it for other things too. So it starts with this. It gets implemented to stop this underage porn kind of thing, and then it'll be this other thing is hateful speech. That's hateful speech, and blah, blah, blah. And that applies to this.
The tentacles start to grow.
Well, it's first of all, strongly against underage, any kind of thing like that. But I think that's kind of the role of the police officers in a society to investigate and find those people and put them in jail. I think that, censoring what can be put online and eroding the ability of the population to speak freely is like applying a sledgehammer to, an ant, right? That you're really going heavy-handed here, and there is a net danger to society where if it is applied to a number of different things, like if I talk against climate change, what's going to happen? Right? If I have data that shows this, data that shows that, is that going to be censored? I don't know. And so people start self-censoring. They're not allowed to talk about, they're not allowed to question. And the scientific process is about questioning.
Yeah.
Right? If you
Funny
can't,
how that is, right?
or if you can't question something, then that's not science. If you're not allowed to question something, it's not science. Let's question climate change. Let's see how real it is.
Right.
And and
Because
society will benefit.
if it is real and you question it, it will become more real, it'll become more obvious.
That's right.
You can't lose.
Yeah. And so
by questioning.
if you have a scientist who has evidence and papers saying that, climate change really isn't a big deal, by censoring that guy and removing his funding, you're actually kind of eroding your argument for climate change. Right.
You're doing a disservice to it, really.
Right. And it's
because you're disallowing a study that has happened.
Let's look at the study. Is it sound? Is it this? Let's magnify our attention and look at it and go, is this study sound?
Yeah.
Right. And let's get more eyes on this to have a better view of this. But no, instead of that, it's like, this guy's now going to propagate information that would lead to dangerous climate change in the future.
Right.
Right. And that's dangerous. We can't have that. So let's remove his funding.
Yeah.
So this, what's happening in society, like I have kids, I'm quite concerned. I was, not that I lived in any kind of communist, regime, but I went to Russia and I saw that. And, I don't want my kids to live in a society where they can't talk about something. I want to live in a society where government stops crimes. And by crimes, I mean harm to others. I don't think that thought is a crime or can be a crime. Like, even if I think, about, you yell at me and I'm like, I'm going to kill you. But I say that in my mind. I don't think I should go to jail for that. I should go to jail if I try to do it. And so thought, speech, right? And I apply that even to the most extreme circumstances where, you have religious groups that go on there and they go, everybody who's white skin, they're spawn of the devil, they're evil, they're this, and they're less than human. Even if I believe in speech so much that, I would not try to censor them, even if it's really hateful what they're saying. Because I think that the more information people have around that particular topic, the more they realize is bullshit.
Exactly.
And by kind of removing that discussion, you're not allowing people to really educate themselves and
discover the truth.
Well, it's kind of, and whatever that truth is, whatever that conclusion is, I think it's kind of, it kind of like assumes that people aren't intelligent and they're not able to come to their own conclusions.
It definitely assumes that.
And that's very insulting, I think. Like if you think that I can't go and study and do my research and you're removing that ability from me. Like I really think that the internet, unlike what you were talking about in your prior podcast, I really think the internet's amazing. There's no negative as far as I'm concerned. Okay. So if you look at the internet as this massive library of knowledge, I think it's going to be censored. I think things are being removed from the internet. And by removing it from the internet, you're basically shaping how history will be remembered, how events will be remembered in the future. Like, looking at COVID, right? Looking, did this happen? Did that happen? Whatever your opinions are, I think what you find on the internet now is very slanted towards one view, and that will impact how 100 years from now, when you go on the Google of the time or use your AI or whatever to look at what happened in 2020. Well, they're going to base that who the victors write the rules, and the people with influence and power will basically write
what they want to project on
right
there and tell you the story they want to tell you.
I look at anything in history now and I go like, I don't know if that's true.
Right.
Like you look at Herodotus, one of the first historians, and he wrote something based on his perception, his understanding, his culture. And he was traveling around and he tried to explain history and talk about all these monarchs and everything. I don't think it's true. I think it might be close to the truth. It might be 70, 80% there. I don't know. I'm certainly not one to be able to judge that. But it's not true. And nothing is true. Truth is impossible to ascertain. The scientific process, even if you say there is gravity, we don't know what gravity is, right? If you say, here's the speed of light, we know it, or here's the gravity, function, or any kind of scientific fact, 1 + 1 = 2. Anything, I don't think you can ascertain with 100% certainty that what that statement says is true. It's always like 99%, or in most cases, or most often, or there's always that. That's what science is.
Yeah.
It's probability. You're testing a hypothesis.
I think the sun is the perfect example of that, because I'm sure there was a time when everyone had 99% certainty that the sun revolved around the earth. We had all the evidence we needed. Like, obviously that's true. And then for someone to counter it, and conspiracy theorists, et cetera, but that there was a 1% chance that the sun didn't actually revolve around the earth, and it sort of grew from there. And now everyone takes it for granted that the earth revolves around the sun, and people make fun of people who think the earth is flat. But I think that is a perfect example that even the most obvious thing, the sky is blue, we're still at a 99%. Right, that there is that possibility. Even the truest foundational truths can be, you can look at with some skepticism.
Well, because I actually wondered this: is the sky blue? Right. I was bored, and I was like, what's color? Right? Like, I don't know.
Right.
What am I seeing? What am I seeing?
Right.
So really, what you're seeing is just a reflection. So you have the color spectrum. It has all the colors in it. It's like white light. It's the light that we see
from the sun.
Yeah. Even then, it's slanted towards one particular part of the spectrum because of the ozone layer or whatever.
Right.
So, but it comes and it hits. I don't know, something that's colored. Like
everything.
This over here is kind of orange-ish, like skin color.
Right.
Does that mean that the paper on this board is orange or skin color or whatever that color is?
Right.
No, not really.
That's
because
just what's reflected off.
It's actually rejecting the orange color.
Right.
That's what's reflecting off.
Right.
So that got me to thinking, well, what if the actual color of this, it's rejecting orange.
Right.
So it's not orange.
It's not actually orange.
No.
Yeah.
It's just a thing that reflects orange light.
Right.
So
does anything have color, right?
Well, things reflect certain colors, parts of the spectrum.
Right.
That's all I know.
Right.
And again, I don't even know that for sure. But that's my point, is when you start looking into anything, you can always question it. I had this great argument with somebody about, 2 + 2 = 4. Great. It's possible that's not true. And, you start getting into, quantum. I heard you say things about quantum before, but just the very definition of two, the concept can be questioned. And to know anything in life for sure, you need a lifetime of inquiry, even just what is the concept of two.
Right.
You could spend years studying that and really digging into it.
Right.
Where does one end and two begin?
Right.
And if I have this thing, you can really dig into everything in the world. So going back to censorship, right? That discussion, right? Would you censor me questioning, if things have color, right? Like,
right. No, they won't.
No, you won't, because you don't have an agenda that says, well, everybody needs to think that things have color.
Right.
So once you start censoring something, if YouTube or whatever was censoring discussion on reflections of, light spectrum on different objects,
right.
I'd be like, why? Why are you denying this discussion?
Right.
And why are you removing my ability to have this discussion?
And there would have to be,
it's really weird.
But there would have to be some underlying motive.
There has to be
some publisher, some distributor who doesn't want that information.
It's their life, their life kind of work to prevent people from thinking about how color is perceived and how blah blah blah. And it sounds kind of ridiculous because everybody either they don't care or they take it for granted, but that's okay. We can still have a discussion about it, and I think that should apply to everything. It certainly should apply to dangerous topics like, is it okay to, go and kill people that you think, are against your religion, or, those kind of really dangerous topics, child pornography. All right. Let's talk about it instead of hiding it. I think when you hide something, that's where cockroaches, right? Lies love to be hidden.
Right.
And if you're hiding something, then you
prefer the darkness.
Right. Like evil things prefer darkness, and the removing the evil things is by
putting a light on it.
Let's have the whole internet look at who's doing child pornography, and instead of all hiding away from it, let's try to find the people doing it, and let's have that discussion. Go like, well, what should happen to that person? That's a great discussion to have. And that's where the values of society come out. And, I have kids. I don't want anybody to harm my kids, right? So I'm biased. I have an opinion. I don't want this kind of, activity happening. So I'm going to, cast my vote a certain way. That person who does it should go to jail. Yeah, totally. And that's okay to have that discussion. I'm not harming anyone. And the guy who wants this activity to happen, I respect his opinion to discuss it, as long as he doesn't do it. Right? Like I can, yeah.
Yeah. I don't think everybody is like you or I. I think there are some people who come from it from an emotional perspective rather than, I think we're more of a purely rational perspective. I think people want to hide things because they feel upset that it exists. They know that it's bad. They don't want anybody to see it. I mean, parents do that with their kids to a certain extent, right? So I don't know. Where was I going with that? I guess.
I think I see your point that, it's easier to swipe
here's where I was going with that.
Swipe it under the rug.
Because it is bad.
It is bad.
And this is what we were saying, that there are good intentions behind people wanting to not publish things, right? And it's a very interesting philosophical principle that I think about a lot, actually. And that is, the greater the good, the greater the evil, right? And let's just use it from maybe we don't even need to use good and evil, but in look at it in terms of pre-life, rocks, dirt. There's no real life yet, so there's no real death, but there's decomposition, call it. Then when you get to plant life, okay, you have life, and now you can have death, right? With animals, you've got maybe even suffering at that point and death, because it's a higher form of life. So, and then let's get off, and then with humans, of course, you can go up the scale, but then we don't even need to just be there. You can sort of look at planes, flying planes. Flying across the world is a great thing. But it's a good, but what's the evil that comes with that? It can crash, and a lot of people can go have this horrific experience. Nuclear as well. So the greater the good, the greater the evil. And I feel like we're fighting that because the internet it's a greater good. You were just saying yourself, it's giving us all this information, but at the same time, it can be used for the greater evil, right? And of course, the Christ is always linked with the Antichrist, the greater the good, the greater the evil. So I feel like people are fighting against that. People don't want nuclear. People don't want more information because they know that the more of that happens, the greater the potential for evil, and or however they perceive evil to be. And I don't know. I see where they're coming from with that, and
change is scary.
Yes.
Right. If you're putting something new in, and you don't really understand, or it's never been done before, or change is scary for everybody.
Yeah.
Right. It's like we don't know how we'll react to it. We don't know how doing this thing, how doing nuclear. Again, it's something that should be debated. You're talking about duality, and I would love to get into that, but maybe we shouldn't. I don't know.
What do you mean? What about duality?
It's something that a lot of people really believe in, and they use kind of dualistic glasses to look at the world. Mm-hmm. Right? It's kind of like a foundational belief that shapes how people see the world around them. And just from your comment now,
I tend to look at things like that.
Yeah. And most people do. Right?
Yeah.
I looked into it a little bit. And again, it's just my own personal opinion. And it's great that we can have this discussion.
Yeah.
I'll start with just my statement, and then we can debate it.
Okay.
I think that in a dualistic system or kind of system, mm-hmm. one side is something and the other side is the absence of that one thing. And I look at, for example, I'm going to give kind of like the most obvious example is that, light and darkness. Mm-hmm. Darkness isn't a thing.
Right.
Darkness doesn't exist.
It's just lack of light.
It's lack of light.
Right.
And if you look at evil and good, evil doesn't exist, in my opinion. It's just the absence of good.
That's the Christian definition of evil, right?
The absence of good.
Yes.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
But, I'm
how interesting that
I'm
you
100.
though.
But so we look.
But let's talk about that a bit, though.
Right,
how do we know that evil is just the absence of good?
Well, if you're looking at a certain, let me just continue a little bit, because look at the word nothing. Right. I did Toastmasters, right? Mm-hmm. And I wanted to challenge myself. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I'm going to do a speech, 7-minute speech. Uh-huh. And you always have to pick a topic, right? Uh-huh. Or subject. And I said, I'm going to do a speech, 7 minutes about nothing. Right. And I told people this, and they're like, cool, whatever, Sam, you're just one of these weird people. So I went up and I spoke for 7 minutes about nothing. Right. And the conclusion of the speech was that we look at nothing as a thing. Right. I say nothing, and so we conceptualize it as something. Right. But really it's nothing. Right. So you can't actually conceptualize nothing in your mind. Right. Because as soon as you think of something, you think of something. Right. So we don't really understand, and we look at darkness the same way. We say, well, darkness is a thing. It exists. I can go in a room and it's dark. So it exists. It's a thing. Right. We look at evil and we say, well, it exists. It is a thing. However, and this is where I'm happy to debate, because that was my kind of theory statement. Any dualistic system has something that is in that kind of context, in that framework, that is, and something that is the lack of it, right? Or the absence of it. And you can apply this. So with that's my lens. And now I look at everything and it's just changed because now I see good in everything. And even if it's really slight, there's still some kind of good in it. And you can talk about an assassination or somebody going and killing my kids or whatever. Right. There's always a little bit of good everywhere. Right. There is no vacuum in the universe. Nowhere in the universe is there nothing. There's something everywhere. And even though we don't perceive it, we can't detect it, it still doesn't mean there's nothing there. There is something everywhere in the universe. Same thing for good in everything. And this is a really controversial statement.
It's not that controversial for me. As someone who studied theology, I find it fascinating that you said that you thought evil was just the absence of good, because that's what it's taught at the theological level, right? And it definitely spins everything in a positive way, and I think it's pretty fascinating. I mean, when I boil, I think we spoke about this last time, the last podcast with Ronnie, when you boil evolution down, it's really just two things. One movement that's advancing everything forward, and the other movement that's dissolving everything back into entropy. And it's just those two forces. And maybe the positive force is all that exists, and that entropic force is just the absence of that forward moving force. I don't know. I think I could argue against it. I mean, duality. I mean, are you saying then that there is no such thing as duality, and that there is only, what's the word, one?
Yeah. And I have to kind of asterisk that I am biased. I'm a human. I have things that I want.
Right.
And so if somebody goes and kills my children, I don't think that's good.
Right.
I think that's very bad for me.
Right.
And so, looking at those kind of arguments, I have to say, well, the good is on a different level, right? And I think the evil is perceived on a relativistic level. So everything is relative from your understanding, your point of view, your angle. And so that is what allows evil to be perceived, is your angle and your relativistic viewpoint towards a certain action, thing, event. And yeah, I would totally be angry if something, happened to, somebody comes and cuts off my leg or something. I'd be like, wow. There's plenty of evidence of that changing people fundamentally. And, some people will say, I've had this really bad thing happen in my life, but I was able to overcome it. And now I'm like this amazing individual.
Right.
People lost both their legs in an accident, and now they're giving speeches.
Right.
So we all love that. It's a controversial topic.
I love how both you and my last guest, Ronnie, are not religious, but definitely have religious tendencies, if you will. Or definitely engage philosophical principles and like dualism and, quantum and these things. I find that pretty fascinating.
I think I was listening to a podcast where one person was like, very Christian, and the interviewer wasn't, and so the interviewee, the guest, was like, well, you're not religious, so you don't have values, right? And the interviewer was like, what? Like, of course I have values,
right?
And it's not because I'm not religious that I like. Religion doesn't have the monopoly on values and quote unquote good values, right? Of helping your neighbor and, turning the other cheek. And like, I read Gandhi's autobiography when I was fairly young. And if I have a hero, it's Gandhi. And at least what we're told of him, I don't know, maybe he was a bad guy. It's just, nobody knew it, or it was hidden or whatever, because he's a very political figure. I wouldn't know. But from what I know of Gandhi, yeah, he's somebody I aspire to and shaped my values. Gandhi wasn't Christian. He was religious in a Hindu sense, but the way he spoke and the way he acted as a human. And, having good values is what makes you a good human. And again, with our prior discussion, I mean, quote unquote good, but I think we put value in, helping others, and it's constructive to society. So I'm not religious at all, but I have values.
So let me argue against this. This is not even necessarily my point, but I think where someone, a theist or a Christian or Muslim, whoever believes in one God might, I think where they're coming from with that argument is that ultimately, even though you may have values as an atheist, or anybody who's an atheist may have values, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, because from your perspective, the sun's going to blow up and life's going to end at some point. So, and where I'm getting at with that is, what I'm saying is that what that theist is thinking is that, why do you have values in a world that's going to end, right? Because it doesn't really matter. And we always get those photos of Earth as like a little speck, and your suffering is on that speck to remind us that our sufferings mean nothing in the great world. Whereas the theist, at least the theist gets to say that at the end of the day, life lives forever. So those values are geared towards that eternal life, right? And I feel that that's kind of where they come from that perspective, when they say, okay, sure, you're an atheist and you have values, but at the end of the day, your values aren't, there's no solidity behind it. There's no even real reason for it, because it's just going to fade away into
What do
energy.
you think? That's what those other people are saying. What do you think?
I'm a theist, so I believe in God.
Yeah, but what do you think of what you just said here? That there's no reason behind, it's illogical, or kind of a...
I think there's a fair argument there. I don't think a lot of atheists will take it that far. I think people, like you said, are people, and we're driven by our day-to-day needs, our biological instincts to love and care and have responsibility for our families, for our kids, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's sort of inbuilt in us. And so values will come out of that. But I think from a purely rational perspective, I think there is a point to that. If this life really is just going to burn up, those values don't mean that much.
I'll offer my point of view, and it's not everyone else's. And you can't, generalize what I'm going to say to all, theists or atheists.
Sure.
Yeah, sorry. Let's take lying. Right.
Lying?
Yeah,
Okay.
lying. Like, you say something that's not true.
Right. The absence of truth is a lie. Okay.
I lied a lot as a kid.
All right.
I lied a lot.
All right.
And probably through teenage years, I didn't want to deal with something, so I lied about it.
Right.
And I didn't have a giant God finger, wave at me or wag at me and go like, "Thou shalt not lie." And okay, I'm reformed. I'll stop lying now.
Right.
It's a process that came naturally. I realized how shitty it made my life.
Right.
Like I had to remember what I said to this person, and it conflicts with what I lied to this person, and that's going to come together. Oh shit, they're going to meet now. Like it made my life miserable. I hated it. And at one point, it's like, I'm going to try just telling the truth, my truth, right? But I'm going to tell the truth, how
Right.
I see it, how I understand it.
Right.
And man, my whole life changed. It's
Right.
like, whoa, like this is great.
All right.
Right? Like telling the truth is amazing.
Yeah.
And, the same goes for, loving your neighbor. The same goes for I've hated people. And actually, I find a lot of hate, most hate in, very strong religious groups. Mm-hmm. They're going to go off and strap bombs to themselves, and they're going to do this, they're going to do that. And, a Christian would say, well, they're in the wrong religion. They have the wrong belief. But even within Christianity, you have the devil, and you have those that are influenced by the devil, and you have the people who advance the devil's agenda. And that is giving a lot of power to evil. Mm-hmm. And that, if I were to say, just question what they're saying, they would like brand me. Some would brand me, you're this or you're that. And I've learned that branding other people and assuming I know how they live and wanting to change their lives because I disagree with the way they think. From my journey, I found that to be very disruptive in my life. It sucks. When you try to live other people's lives, you're responsible for two minds. Like, it's hard enough to have one mind. And so I don't hate. I think that hate is what the more you hate, the more evil you see. And it's kind of like this self-fulfilling kind of black hole that you can dive into. And a big core fundamental belief of Christianity is the existence of the devil, right? So the devil was an archangel, a very powerful one, you know, God's kind of like right hand, and he turned around and did his thing and fell. And so you know, all I see in that whole narrative is multiplicity and change, and two things competing. And I can choose which way I want to go. Do I want to start pointing fingers and trying to control people and hate everybody? Do I want to lie? Do I want to kill someone? Do I want to steal? Do I want to, you know, not love anybody? No. And those are things that I've learned naturally. My argument then is what you just said, is that it's part of human nature. I don't care about the end of the universe. I don't do it because I'm going to live another life. I actually think that's false. If you're doing something because you think, oh, I'm going to get, you know, if I do this shitty thing now, because I'm going to, you know, have points in heaven, that means that what you're doing is you think is shitty. So that's even worse. It's like you're not lying because you want to have a good place in heaven. That's a worse incentive than not lying because you don't want to lie. And you know how negatively it's going to influence your life. So to me, it boils down to my immediate circle, how I live my life. And it makes total sense to have these great values that you know, are shared with all the religions. I mean, you look at Hinduism, you look at Buddhism, even Islam, right? Like Islam has a little bit, if you read the book, it's got some strong statements in there. You know, you look at all religions, and there's kind of like a fundamental tie to all of them. And those are the fundamental values that if somebody just says, well, I want to live a happy life, right? Well, what makes me happy? Does killing people does lying make me happy? Some people might, right? But I don't think they're the majority. I think the majority of people realize that lying sucks and it makes your life complicated and you don't want to do it.
So do you think life has a right? Could there be, and not to point fingers at atheists, but just call it an atheist who says, you know what, let's blow up this world because it doesn't matter, right? We're all going to go to energy anyway, so let's just do it now. Is there a right? Is that a rightful thought? Is that a rational thought?
Well, rationality is a spectrum. And, you know, there are people who believe that trees are sacred, and people who believe in aliens, and people who believe in a lot of different things. Some people believe that killing is good, and it's, you know, what they should do. They're born into it. And you look at the terrorism and things like that. So that's a spectrum. And I'm sure there's somebody out there trying to destroy the world. Yeah, I'm sure it exists. And, you know, if we don't have that discussion, we kind of censor that kind of thought, then that person's able to operate in impunity, right? So I would hope that the majority of humanity would be able to identify that person and stop that person before they do it, because I want to continue existing. And I don't want to continue existing because I'm promised to go to heaven later. I want to continue existing because I want to continue existing.
So there's no right or wrong thought then?
I think
like you're saying,
I think that all thought is just what it is. It's thought. It is what it is. And society as a whole, humanity as a whole, like I look at climate change, and I go with the premise the Earth doesn't give a shit. You know, whether it's dinosaurs or, you know, whatever organism going on its little continents, I don't think the Earth gives a shit. If it has conscious thought, I don't think it gives a shit. Does it have? I don't know. Conscious thought, I don't know. But
in us, it does.
But for us, right? For humanity, if we throw, you know, tons of plastic in the ocean, and if we put lead in gasoline, and if we do a whole bunch of different things, if we, you know, put these toxic heavy metals in our lifestyle and do all that, that's going to negatively influence our lives. And I think that that's what we need to study, to discuss, but it is a self-centered view. If humanity were to be destroyed, do I think the earth would be sad, or would it go against the purpose of the universe? No, I don't think that it would go against anything. I think that as society, we have to value living. I think most people value living, and we have to value living well in a sane environment where I can breathe good air. And so it's in our self-interest to make sure that that happens. And I'm not doing it because of, some commandment or anything. It's common sense to me.
It's a biological commandment.
I think it's, maybe the real commandments are in our DNA.
Yeah. I mean, I think it pretty much is, right? I mean, life is always trying to explore and expand, and it's constantly fighting death, and it's constantly winning over billions of years now at this point. I mean, it's like...
It's a cool machine.
It's a cool, awesome machine. It's such a cool machine that death and entropy can't seem to stop it for some strange reason. Well, I mean, it's been millions and millions of years, and death cannot put an end to life yet. But that's so bizarre.
You're looking at death as a thing, and you're anthropomorphizing death, saying that it wants this.
I am.
How? Explain how that works. So death is trying to kill life. Like what? What are you saying?
Well, I mean, that is exactly what I'm saying, right? I mean, from a rational point of view, I think that's pretty obvious. By the way, I get the non-duality argument that you're going with. I'm not even saying I necessarily believe what I'm saying, right. But I think when someone looks at the evolutionary history of the Earth, it is a bloody, cruel machine.
Man, that's a shitty way of looking at life, man.
I mean, it just is, though. I mean, look at nature. Look at sharks. Eating fish.
Sure.
Look at a cheetah taking down.
So is a shark entropy or death? Then is that like? So you're looking at death as a whole, as a concept, and saying it's kind of like a shark.
Sure.
Where it wants to do this and do that. That's kind of like saying the devil this, or evil this, or darkness is trying to take over the light. Like in any kind of, and happy to discuss this in greater detail, but I don't think it's basically nothing. It's an illusion based on our limited relativistic perception. We understand something, and we understand something to be evil in our little cocoon, in our perception, and for our interests, then something is evil, right? I don't think there is this dark kind of shadow kind of, in the corner somewhere, waiting to like strangle me. I think that's, even looking at God, because I do believe in a power, right? But I don't think that power is anthropomorphic. I don't think that power has human attributes.
Why not?
Because...
And let me throw this at you.
Yeah, go for it.
Is that power the cause of everything?
That power is everything.
So if you and I have anthropomorphic qualities, doesn't it stand to reason that the power must also have anthropomorphic qualities?
No, because the anthropomorphic qualities are based on relativism. And if you look at the entire universe as one thing, then it can't be many things because it's one thing. So we're getting into philosophy.
Sure, but we define anthropomorphism, right? So
yeah, well,
that's something we're talking about.
So
it does exist. Maybe it's relativist.
It's in
the grand scheme of things.
It's a thing that as humans we've devised to understand the world, just like math. Does math exist? No. It's a human construct.
And not necessarily, because let me ask you this: could aliens have anthropomorphic qualities?
To their own biology, yes.
So then it wouldn't be relativist just to humans.
No,
it could be a universal thing.
A dog
has anthropomorphic qualities.
For dog, right? I guess it's not.
So how about we name some of those anthropomorphic qualities? What would you consider an anthropomorphic quality?
I mean, for a dog, if
I mean, the legs. First thing I think of.
Well, I'm talking more like emotions, right? In the way that God is spoken about in most religions, jealous God, angry God,
Anthropomorphic.
loving God. Those are all
Creator God.
So to me, what happened there is we as humans have these things in us, and we understand the world based on them, and we've just applied them to this ideal, this beautiful thing.
But I don't think unjustly. I think we have applied it to it because it must have those qualities.
Right. Let's go pure.
It's cause and effect, right? The effect contains the cause. So if you and I have anthropomorphic qualities, then the power must also have it. Otherwise, you and I would have something that this power doesn't. And therefore, then that power doesn't, it negates. You just said it's everything.
Let me just ask you one question then, right? If God is everything, and I think you would agree with that.
Yes, that's a Christian belief with a slight
a twist.
Yeah.
Right. If God is everything, what can he be angry at? He's everything. There's no God number 2 to be angry at. There's if there's everything, the entire universe, every atom is this one beautiful, perfect thing. What is it angry at? It can't be angry at the other universe or the other God or the other thing, because it is everything.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
I think there's truth in that.
If God is everything, then there's no way it can be angry.
Well, okay. Well, let's throw the Christian twist on it.
I don't know if we're getting too deep in the weeds here.
We'll go a little bit more and then we'll end it. Besides God being everything,
because I do want to talk about AI if we can.
You mean the AI that's gonna tell us whether God exists or not?
Sorry, or maybe it's a topic for another podcast.
I wanted to. We'll definitely have you on. And
I'm studying it right now, and it's fascinating.
AI.
It's going to change society.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone agrees with that now at this point. Like everyone's like, yeah, AI is here to change everything, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I use it.
Maybe there is no discussion to be had.
Well, what besides ChatGPT, what sort of AI stuff are you working with?
It's ChatGPT. For example, I downloaded a Olama.ai on my laptop, and I downloaded a model. Right, there's probably about a dozen or 20 different models that you can download, and a model is an AI that's built on data and information that was fed. Right, and so I downloaded this thing, and there's a medical one. Right, it's trained. It was given all the medical books that exist, pretty much.
What's the
sum total of medicine?
What's Elon promoting now? What's the one he's promoting?
I don't know what he's promoting. So there's a model that I downloaded, and it's trained on all scientific kind of health-based medicine
journals,
literature,
everything.
There's another one that's math. Right. There's another one that's psychology. Right. So I can download these models, and I can basically have access to these models. They say it's accurate up to a certain percentage. So this model, based on how it's trained, it's 70 to 90% accurate,
right,
or it's 94% accurate,
right,
or it's 85% accurate. So you can actually measure that. If you ask
right,
it a question, what is 2 plus 2? It says 4, and for that question, it's accurate. And then it asks a bunch of questions based on the data set that trained it, and how accurate is it? So I have a model that's like 90 something accurate based on, medicine journals. I have access on my laptop offline, no internet.
Cool.
I'm not querying some database somewhere. I have all medical human knowledge on my laptop with like a 90% accuracy.
Yeah.
Right? I can ask anything, and it will tell me with a 90% accuracy what humanity knows. That to me is amazing. And this goes for math, it goes for psychology, it goes for anything.
Anything you can read.
It's like taking the Encyclopedia Britannica from our youth. Maybe you're too young. I don't know.
I remember Britannica.
Yeah,
baby.
so it was like, wow, you got an encyclopedia. There was like such a cool thing to have.
Book, baby.
Yeah.
That's where all the information was. Yeah, you need to figure something out. You got to break open the encyclopedia, baby.
And now you have the internet that took that over, and this is the next iteration. It's the entire knowledge of the internet in one model.
And not even just the internet, like everything that's been written.
It's
before
amazing. It's mind blowing.
It is pretty mind blowing.
Yeah,
it is. It's maybe it's going to affect things in ways we can't even imagine. For me, I'm like, I just don't understand schools so much anymore. I'm starting to see how at least education, maybe the socialization of kids, that I can see that having some use in schools, but like, why are you going to go learn from one individual about a topic when you can learn from AI that has more information than that one individual will ever be able to have, and will be able to provide you custom-based learning based on what you need at the time and how you actually need to learn it? I mean, there's almost no comparison. And I'm just like, for me, I just think universities are, I don't know. And I don't know about them anymore. We have teachers right here, greater teachers, and no disrespect to the teachers. I'm sure the teachers aren't liking what I'm saying right now, right? And I'm just really caught up with AI as well, and just sort of how powerful and magnificent that is.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's scary as well, because
the greater the good, the greater the evil. Why is it scary?
There is no evil, buddy. It's all good. but on a relativistic point of view, the things that could be done with it might be, what I would consider evil.
Right.
And
that's why people are scared of AI.
Well, and it could be subtle. So OpenAI is not open. Right. They're very secretive with their code. And so ChatGPT is controlled by a corporation.
Right.
And, somebody was telling me, I wanted to do a job ad, and I had no idea what I needed to do, the qualifications, the skills and all that. Mm-hmm. Asked ChatGPT. ChatGPT came up, boom, here's a job ad. Mm-hmm. And it even recommended certifications that I had no idea about. Right. I was like, wow, how amazing is that?
Right.
And I asked him, I said, well, how do you know that certification wasn't recommended in that query, in that answer? Because OpenAI got paid to promote it. And the guy was like, well, yeah, maybe that's the case. Mm-hmm. So ads, right? When you go to Google and you see a pop-up or you see an image, buy this, buy that, think this, think that. That is now going to be embedded in a very, in a way that is very difficult to identify. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if you disagree with it, right, if I ask, the AI can respond and convince you that, Coca-Cola is better than Pepsi, whatever.
Right.
Whatever OpenAI wants to push, because they want to make money.
Yeah.
And how do you think they're going to make money? A subscription, maybe. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of people have also identified how powerful it is to shape a society's narrative and point of view.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where I think open source models is the way to go. You can download your own ChatGPT on your laptop, never connect to OpenAI again. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the narrative around AI is that it's dangerous. It has to be regulated. Mm-hmm. You hear that all the time now. It's so dangerous. It could, got to regulate it. Mm-hmm. Who's pushing that? It's the AI, the people who have the corporates that are developing AI.
Right.
It's the Musks. Mm-hmm. It's the, Altman. It's the people who are developing AI who are warning against it. Why? It's because there's an open source AI movement that is threatening their models. Mm-hmm. I have models that I can download for free that are as accurate as ChatGPT.
Right.
That scares them. They need to create some kind of regulatory framework to prevent open source AI from developing.
Right.
You need to be able to register with government. There's going to be fees. There's going to be that. You're going to have to hire, a legal team to comply with this law.
Right.
So that's going to stop AI from being free and distributed. And I think that's a scary thing for me.
Yeah. And I think let's talk about that on the next podcast.
Sure.
I think that's the decentralized question. I think we start talking about Nostr at that point, and that's the sort of whole...
How long have we been going for?
It's been 2 hours and 9 minutes.
Yeah.
So I think
I beat your last guy, unless you cut some stuff off.
Well, some people were saying that's too long, Badir. No, nobody wants to hear anything more than 15 minutes. Yeah, I at the end of the day, I love having these conversations, right? So that it's more about sort of me being able to have these conversations, because you don't always get to have them. And
you can take clips from your podcasts and do them like Joe Rogan does, right?
Sure.
He'll talk for 3 hours.
Everyone does that now. There's like these shorts,
Sure.
It's all over YouTube. And
if our conversation has any shorts in there, I don't know, but
I think it has more shorts, than anything else. A lot of good little moments in there. But so thanks for coming on. What are you up to for the rest of the weekend? What are you doing here in Cayman? Are you going sailing? I know you sail, and I want to bug you about that.
A sail?
Yeah.
Oh, you want to be invited on the boat?
Sure.
Yep. I'm also going to be in Prospect Playhouse play. That's why I'm growing this thing.
Okay, I noticed a little bit, but
it hasn't really gotten
so
that big.
Tell me about that. Tell me about the play. What play?
It's an upcoming play. I don't know how much I can say.
I see. Be careful. Okay, I just want to know: Are you acting?
I think they've named it publicly. So yeah, it's The Mousetrap from Agatha Christie.
Ah, cool.
Yeah,
cool.
I'm not going to speak about the play.
Okay,
but
you're involved. Are you producing, or are you on stage?
I'm on stage.
Cool. I'll be there, baby.
I've never done any kind of acting before.
Okay.
And
so you're pushing yourself a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I figured I had to do it once in my life.
Yeah, I did it at Prospect Playhouse too.
Which one did you do?
2020. Right when COVID hit, actually. It
Which one did you do?
With our class. It was like maybe a beginner's class with Kirsty.
We did a class.
Yeah, I did several classes. And yeah, it was pretty challenging. I'm not a natural actor at all. But I wanted to challenge myself. So yeah, but I have to say that COVID did cut us short, so I didn't actually finish.
That's a shame.
Yeah, the program. But cool. That's good to know that you're doing that. So you got to practice at some point?
I got lines to practice.
Tonight?
It's a lot. So it's tough. I look at just a show on Netflix, and these people had to they talk as if it's normal, like we're doing now.
Right,
but
right.
If we had to memorize this whole conversation and then do it again, memorized, it's tough.
It is tough. That's part of the actor's job, though, for sure.
Yeah. So lots of cool things happening in Cayman, and that's something that me and my wife really love is the Prospect Playhouse. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
And it has, it's kind of one of the bastions of quote unquote culture, right? Even though it's not Caymanian culture,
right?
It's still, it's
still theater, it's still
something.
Art. Yeah.
There's something of value there that I really like.
Yeah. And the kids do great stuff. I saw Beauty and the Beast last week at St. Ignatius. Awesome production.
Really?
Yeah. Like 200 and something kids involved.
Wow.
Great acting. They're singing.
Wow.
Yeah, man.
What a great opportunity for children, right?
Yeah.
It just, and maybe going back to what's the point of university? I think it has to do with something like that.
Yeah, I agree.
Getting you out of the house and off the Xbox.
It's true.
There's still value in university.
Yeah.
Even though I agree with you that the information is free now. It's like Goodwill Hunting, right?
Right.
Your $50,000 education could have been had for $5 a late fees in the library.
Right. Yeah. Cool, man. Well, thanks a lot for being on the podcast. Appreciate it. We'd love to have you back on again.
Sure. Yeah. Right.
Cool.
Cheers.
See you later.